Hello. Y'all probably know me as Phoenix. I am from TSP, and I really enjoy roleplay, and definitely actually started out like there. And this is actually what today's lecture is going to be, like roleplay, kind of like more on character story development kind of deal. So this might come out more as a rant because this is something I'm really passionate about, so fair warning. So pretty much whenever you're like going to get a story together, like you can have a general idea for a story, but what's really going to drive that story is the character that you make, like all the characters and how they interact, their motivations, pretty much everything that goes into that. There's also like setting that could also play a factor. Like you're not going to have some kind of, let's say like a desert tomb raid scene when your entire goal is to find something in a jungle, unless maybe like there's like a journey, but that jungle temple won't be major like desert kind of deal, you know? But this will focus more on character. So like whenever you have like character, you really have to know the character's motivations, what they want in their life. You really need to like have their backstory, pretty much their personality, how they react to things, how they see the world, how they know things, or not know things, but you know, how they perceive things, how they take in information, what they have learned in their life. That is all really important to character, which drives a story. And just as much as like a character will drive a story will change a character. Like you're not going to go on a massive journey to, let's say, and like experience so many things on an adventure where you go to England or something and like encounter many hardships along the way. That kind of thing changes you. And your story will change your character, and it's important to really realize how that happens, how things change in your character, like based on the story. And it's just, it can really be just awesome how that happens, because like one story I remember very clearly from this more kind of like book kind of deal was called Surviving Antarctica, which basically a group about some kids in the future, like I think it was like 2080, if I remember correctly. It's been a long time since I read it, but pretty much you have like a group of characters who sign up on this kind of TV show thing in order to hike to the North Pole, and they have to like endure a lot of things, a lot of suffering, because things just go awry, and you know, they don't make it, if I remember correctly, but they don't make it, but they are changed. They do become like much closer friends. They learn to understand each other. While they were trying to make it to this goal, they learned to like survive in this frozen tundra and all this kind of stuff. And it really just that kind of thing leaves a mark on your reader. Your reader learns this stuff, and like they carry these lessons too. One thing that I'm actually, I guess, currently working now on like my own RP in Fihami is so basically the found, like, one of the characters I have she was basically seen as this goddess on earth, could do no wrong kind of deal, couldn't die. she'd be there forever to lead them. And like everyone loved her because, hey, yay. However, things happened and, and she dies, sadly. Sadly, on the night before her 18th birthday, but I might still be salty about that. But her successor is a bit of an airhead and doesn't really know things too well. And so pretty much what's going on there is pretty much she has to learn to fill in all the shoes that her like the previous chief left. It has to fill in these ginormous size shoes, and she's barely gotten experience. She didn't even want to be there in the first place. Neither did the original chief, but that was another arc where she had to basically try to learn, but that was never completed because she died. But so she has to learn all these things, and what's going on like right now with that is that she is struggling to learn this stuff because she was never really aware of things until she was kind of thrown into this position. She never really bothered to pay attention to politics, and now all of a sudden her entire life is politics and that kind of thing. That will leave a change, which is ongoing in my RP. And just like all these kind of things, like a previous kind of story arc I did is like a soccer one where this girl, she goes in, she thinks she's the greatest thing ever. She goes in to play soccer, and she quickly has to learn that she has to play as part of a team. Even with the victories that they still have despite her mistakes, But eventually she learns to work as part of a team, which is a thing. These kind of things, like you have like that heavy, that that headstrong character, super like passionate about things, but doesn't really work as part of a team. It has arrogance. It's extremely arrogant. And throughout the story, all these conflicts, all these things basically teach the character to kind of tone it down a bit, kind of deal, which is pretty much what happens to the story. The story influenced the character just as much as the character influenced the story. If she wasn't so headstrong beforehand, there would be no story. Like if you don't have like, which kind of brings me to character flaws and like their importance in being the story. Character flaws we all have character flaws pretty much. They have a really unique teaching point that they can be. We all make mistakes, and it is something that is just part of life. We have to learn, and that is ever present in stories. Godlike characters, while they can be fun for the 13-year-old, it really isn't engaging in a story. You're gonna eventually want to have like some sort of flaw that a character has to learn from, which is honestly all stories. Like some characters have like that overconfidence that I just mentioned. Some have a deep hatred for humanity that they have to learn to overcome. Some have like shyness that they have to learn to overcome. Some have like other stuff that they have to learn to overcome to work with that kind of deal. Like, and that honestly is what makes stories interesting and what makes characters relatable, which is thing that's more for engagement with like audience, that kind of deal, but it is really important to the story. So pretty much to sum it up, you really have to have like a knowledge of your character, who your character is, their motivations and stuff to drive story. And you have to remember that the story will change your character. No one no one is realistically stagnant and no one is perfect, which I guess leads me to conclude. So I can answer questions if you'd like. You've talked a lot about how story influences character and vice versa. How do you select good stories that drive character development? This way to create engaging conflict. Well, so selecting good stories, it really has a lot to play into. Like you have like your setting, like you have like your character's ambitions, your character's personality, your character's goals in life, etc. And creating like an engaging conflict out of all of that really just comes naturally, honestly. Like the story sometimes ends up writing itself, or maybe have like an idea in mind, like, okay, I want a certain lesson to be learned. And you have like your set of characters and you can like create that story out of there. Just kind of like doing that, driving in by the setting and all that good stuff. Alright, how much do you communicate with your fellow role players around storylines in advance, and how much do you play it by ear? Well, so kind of like Nation RP, which is kind of like what I'm going off of, is it's really just like you have your own nation's individual story and international cooperation kind of deal, which is like really interesting. And a lot of stuff you do have to like coordinate, but some stuff kind of like more like the smaller bits, you do play it by ear kind of deal. So I would say probably equal mix of both, depending on the context. All right. What would you say are some good ways to write strong dialogue? It is something I struggle with as opposed to narration, which I thrive on. I can go on pages about what's going on in a character's head, but I fall apart when said character talks to another. Well, that's just kind of knowing how your character speaks, really getting into their head and just kind of like envisioning that kind of conversation. Like imagine it as a movie kind of deal. You're watching a movie in your head, like, and you see how like these characters, and then you could kind of like really figure out that dialogue that way. That is kind of like how I do like dialogue kind of stuff. Just kind of like I hear it in my head, I see how it goes in my head, kind of like in a movie, and I just write down what I see in my head to the computer. All right. And you mentioned how important having a strong backstory is. What are some good prompts for people to answer when building interesting characters? I would definitely start with what was their childhood like? What was their relationship with their mother, their relationship with their father? How did their schooling go, if that's a thing? How did they grow up? What kind of hardships did the character have to face? What what kind of good times did the character have in their past? Those are a couple prompts that probably if you could like fill those out, you'd have a really decent backstory, I think. Would you recommend playing characters that have more flaws than strengths? Well, more flaws than strengths, that can be that there's like another thing that can go with that, like turning your flaws into strengths, which pretty much learning to like live with like imperfection kind of deal. Like you learn to like get around like your specific weaknesses rather than be weakened by them, I guess. And depending how you play it, it could be fun or it could be just really absolutely annoying. So it really just depends how you play that character and how that character grows in the story. Hmm. My favorite roleplay story or character. I think my all-time favorite is gonna be the character I killed off. Um, her name was Phoenix, and pretty much she had a hard life. Her entire village was killed when she was young, and she pretty much lived in the jungles of Yami. Her entire like her her entire kind of like toddler, like the rest of her childhood, like up until like she was 9, and she was taken to orphanage and then freed from that orphanage, and all that kind of deal. Really hard life when you have no family, and her entire thing was she was not very familiar with society until she was like freed from the orphanage, which was also like a trap to like torture the poor orphaned native children of the island, and she eventually learned to be a part of society and kind of like all that good stuff. And then she was suddenly thrown into the chiefdom, and she was tasked with basically liberating the island from like the foreign invaders kind of deal. And as soon as that happened, she was then tasked with building the island's government and all that kind of stuff. And she basically had to deal with like all like the people, like basically worshiping her, etc., 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 and having to deal with people admiring her so much that they don't listen to what she's saying. They don't really they don't really let her kind of like do what she want to do, implement democracy, all that kind of deal. Um, like implement like story kind of deal, and she basically had to learn to deal with that, and she was basically killed in like the more recent kind of like arcs. Like one thing on the island is that they are a society like matriarchal society. Historically, they like women are seen as kind of like they're awesome because like domestic kind of like things like children and like is seen as like being able to like kind of like raise children is being seen as like amazing and stuff like hunting, fighting is kind of frowned upon. Like that's like a male's task. It's not worthy of a female's attention, that kind of deal. Um and so basically kind of like it had gotten like really violent protests, and she got there to kind of like pretty much help defend like the protesters who are like trying to protest equality, and she was shot and killed, which is sad. It was fun to write her, honestly. All right. When you write posts, do you write in present or past tense? Do you write in first or third person? Is that just a matter of style? It really just a matter of style. Like I personally, it really just depends on when I'm writing. Like if it's like a more kind of like, I guess I noticed that like I tend to write more in the past tense and third person. Um, that's just me. Some people prefer kind of like other ways. And honestly, all depends on your personal style. All Right, sounds like a challenging character. Did you draw inspiration from historical or literary figures? Um, she was kind of like um her own character, I guess. Like I kind of like drew a little bit of inspiration from kind of like folksy heroes, kind of like that one that was like kind of like raised by wolves and like kind of like went on to like be kind of like a Wild West figure or something like that. I forget that character's name. That was kind of like, I guess, like one slight inspiration. Another kind of would be like Teddy Roosevelt that might have like it's slightly inspired, kind of like his deal with like muckraking and just kind of like cracking down on monopolies, that kind of deal. She cracked down like on a lot of like kind of like negative stuff that was there, and um that kind of deal. Some RPers write a lot of backstory but then don't involve that in the actions of their characters. What's the best way to show, not tell other RPers about your characters through posts? Honestly, how I think about this is how they react to things. How that character reacts to different situations would reflect how like what kind of backstory they had, and because I'll take this kind of like, I guess, for a serious moment here. Like I'll take this kind of like, I guess, kind of like we'll take. I don't want to like go that serious though. Heck it. Like you have like a child whose parents were not the best. They maybe even abusive. That kid is not going to come out the same way as like a kid who had like parents who raised them well, who raised them with love and affection, that kind of deal. Those and that difference should be noticeable. If your character had like an easier life, maybe they're even like spoiled a little bit, that would show. Maybe if your character had it rough, that would also show. Maybe like certain items would like become like really uncomfortable to like someone because of like kind of like experiences in their past, or maybe that an item would become like, oh my gosh, I love this thing, kind of deal. So it really should be played by ear, but your reactions to things and how you see the world will be very much ways to show, not tell. What drew me to role playing? Well, honestly, it's really just me kind of being a very, very creative person with a story to tell. And as I joined like nation states last year, that's what really kept me in, and that's how I kind of like found my other like passions in this game. So the worst character I've ever written. Oh my god. Oh my gosh, I am about to tell you guys a story here. So, again, we're transporting back to my island, Vihami. Alright? There is this dude that I wrote. Hold on, I'm gonna have to pull up some like the post that I've written as this dude because it is hilarious. So, in TSP's RP, we have it's like forum based, and we have kind of like a media section, and like we have kind of like a social media where kind of like people can like post kind of like social media kind of things, and and pretty much this character is a bit of an insane dude. he is basically Florida Man plus Donald Trump plus Alex Jones plus like an entire cocktail of drugs and alcohol. He is absolutely insane. He pretty much his entire thing is, oh my gosh, all the other nations of the world are trying to control our minds and kill us all, is his kind of thing. And let me read you like the last post that I had of his, which is kind of like a reaction to the old chief dying kind of deal. And for the record, the name here, like his screen name I've made is the only sane person left. I am Dexity, and I have returned to stream. End Valkyrian brainwashing corpse now by voting Dexity for Prime Minister. And the post is Phoenix Fishy was very clearly a crony being controlled by the Bizernian government, which is another nation that is in RP. The matriarchy fundamentalists were good on taking her out before we could fall to them. Speaking of, Bizern thinks they are a powerful nation, so much so that they're sending mind control zombies to take over our minds, and the Fihamian government insists on keeping the only thing that can stop them banned. When will this corruption cease? Vote me as Prime Minister, and I'll make sure no other nation can control our minds. And, the thing that he's alluding to in that post is drugs, like hard drugs. All right. And so yeah, welcome to insanity. All right, and this question is, how do you know when enough is enough? You need to stop tinkering and you just need to post a bit of role playing. Do you ever struggle with finding a way to write what you want to say or do, and how do you handle that problem? That is a story. That is the story of my... Sorry about that. That is the story of my life, and honestly, I post when I get to the point where, oh my gosh, I can't look at this anymore. I'm just gonna post and take it from there. And honestly, probably not the best thing to do. Get like absolutely so sick and tired of your question, of like trying to create the perfect post that you do that. But that's just kind of the stuff. I like, one thing I'm trying to learn to do is to not do that. So if I ever find a way to like not do that and like actually be happy and be able to go back and read the post like 3 weeks in the future without absolutely dying of cringing to death, then that would be amazing. All right, I guess since that's the last question, I'll thank you guys for listening to my insane Florida woman rants. Thank you for listening to my insane rants, which is basically a summary of any lecture I give, just me ranting.